Chairman Spratt, and then we'll have Speaker Pelosi and Leader/Whip Hoyer speak, and then a few other folks, and we look forward to the unveiling. Want to ask Chairman Spratt's family to work their way here when they're working their way as we speak, which is a wonderful thing. But again, thank you all for coming. As you know, Chairman Spratt chaired this committee from 2007 to 2011. And without fail, anybody that you ask in the House who had the privilege of working with Chairman Spratt would describe him as a gentleman, and that he is. He represented the 5th Congressional District of South Carolina from January 1983 until January 2011. He was the Dean of the South Carolina Congressional Delegation. He was the second-ranking Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee. And as I mentioned, chaired this committee from 2007 to 2011. He was born in North Carolina, raised in South Carolina. He obtained his BA degree from Davidson College, a master's from Oxford University, and a law degree from Yale Law School. He was a captain in the U.S. Army, serving in the Operations Analysis Group in the Office of the Assistant Secretary of Defense, the comptroller over the Pentagon. He's also been a county attorney, a school board attorney, and practiced law in the firm Spratt, McKeon, and Spratt. He also served as the president of Bank of Fort Mill, which his father founded. He is married to the former Jane Stacy of Filbert, South Carolina. They have 3 daughters and 5 grandchildren, and he currently serves as the visiting distinguished professor of public policy at the Winthrop University. So, Mr. Chairman, we welcome you back to the House Budget Committee, where you are always welcome. We want to thank you for your wonderful, wonderful service and your spirit of collegiality, which oftentimes is lacking in this town. So please join me in welcoming Chairman Spratt. An appropriate response to my statement. We will have a much larger standing ovation in a moment. So I now have the privilege of recognizing the House Democratic Whip, a former leader in the House who was a leader when Chairman Spratt served, the Honorable Steny Hoyer, to the podium.
Thank you very much, Tom. Jane, the children, the grandchildren. You've got 5 grandchildren, John. I've only got 3 grandchildren, but I have 3 great-grandchildren. So, but then I'm much older than you are, so I've had more time. You know, as I thought, what would I say? This is Coles to Newcastle. There isn't anybody in this room who has known John Spratt for more than a short period of time, and many of you have known him for a very long period of time. Some of you have known him all your lives. And kindergarten. Yeah. That's most of your life, with all due respect. His colleague, Jim Clyburn, is with us, who is not only his colleague, but his dear and close friend for decades. John Spratt and I are kindred spirits in many ways. We worked together very, very closely throughout his tenure in the Congress of the United States, and certainly his tenure, Tom, in chairing this Budget Committee. John Spratt was a leader in focusing on getting this country to a fiscally sustainable place. I don't know any more compelling voice on behalf of fiscal responsibility and fiscal good policy than my friend John Spratt. We had a pay-go provision that we put in that we think helped us get to balanced budgets, and John Spratt was very much a leader in that effort. You heard about his academic credentials, which are extraordinary. I don't want you, he could not get into the University of Maryland Law School, which is why I went to Yale. And Oxford, of course, that was by choice, I suppose. The fact that he had to go to a foreign school to get a master's degree. But in an institution where too often people think of members of Congress as not responsible, not substantive, not working on their behalf, let me read you some words. My first revelation was to find that this House is not made up of backslappers and glad-handers. It is made up of members who work hard to get here, many out of patriotic purpose, hoping that they, in their time, can contribute to something worthy of this great country. Those are John Spratt's words when he left the Congress. But they are so applicable to John Spratt himself. John Spratt and Jane Spratt have made such a difference for our country. A difference, as Jim, I'm sure, will say, for South Carolina. A difference for this institution, the House of Representatives. He brought great dignity, great intellect, great courtesy, great concern for others, always treating one another and his colleagues with the respect that he believed they deserved. And they returned it in kind because they loved John Spratt. They may have differed with John Spratt, but they knew that he was a person of sincerity, of intellectual integrity and honesty. And there was never a question, but John Spratt was one of the giants with whom we served. I don't know the name of the artist. I know who's the artist. Is he here?
Yes.
Right to your left. I have not seen the picture yet. And I know it will be a picture displaying John Spratt as we see it. But I'm hopeful that you also captured the depth and soul and integrity of John Spratt, which I'm sure was perhaps more difficult than simply his visage. But if you did so, it will be a work of art and an accurate statement of a great representative of the people of the United States of America. John, on behalf of all who have served with you and who have benefited by your leadership, let me say, as sincerely as I can, thank you. Good and decent and wonderful human being. You've made us all better. Thank you.
The other gentleman from South Carolina, the House Assistant Democratic Leader, Mr. Jim Clyburn.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman Rice, and thanks to all of you for being here today. I thought long and hard about what I would say when I was asked to say a few words here today, but usually these talks, I usually kind of do things in the sort of, well, let's say a little levity. I have real problems going to that place when it comes to John Spratt. John Spratt and I have known each other for a long, long time. I am a little older than John. Come July, Stenny and Nancy both keep tapping each other. I'm the baby of this crowd. But come July, I will turn 75 years old. I spent all 75, well, almost 74 in 10 months in South Carolina. I know our state very well. I love that state. And one of the reasons I know that state and love that state so much is because I've gotten to know some real good, decent South Carolinians. But none of them, I have never met anyone better or decent than John Spratt. Often when we served here together, I would go to John, ask his advice, even sometimes ask whether or not I should or should not do something. And John was always gentle, compassionate. And I remember when I told him that I was going to offer for leadership in our caucus, I told him that I really wanted to start off by getting on the Appropriations Committee. So John asked me on that occasion, says, well, have you talked to Dick Gephardt? I said, no, but I think I will. He said, well, maybe you should start with Dick Gephardt. I said, no, I want to start with you. I want you to navigate this journey for me. Well, John told me on that occasion what he thought I should do, and I did what he said. And then he said to me, or do you think you can get on Dick's ticket? I said, no, I don't think so. He said, well, how do you plan to win if you aren't on his ticket? I said, I plan to win because I am going to get you to nominate me. I said, if you nominate me, I think I'll win. And I have no doubt in my mind that his nominating speech on that occasion is what landed me on that committee. Every time I offered in our caucus for anything, I went to John, because I wanted him to nominate me. Because I always knew that whatever shortcomings I had, John would make up for them in his speech. As many of you know, I love history. I've studied history. I studied a whole lot. I keep one of my pieces of history hanging on the wall in one of my offices, and it was written by Abraham Lincoln when Abraham Lincoln was really fighting some difficult battles. He sat down to write what he said was his duty. And he wrote these words: if I would try to read, much less listen to all the attacks made upon me, this shop might as well be closed with other business. I do the very best that I can, the very best that I know how. And I plan to keep doing so until the end. And if the end brings me out right, what people say about me won't matter to anything. And if the end brings me out wrong, 10 angels swearing I was right would make no difference. John was that kind of person. He did his duty. He did it the way he thought it should be done. And I never saw him get discouraged in any way
young lady from California, the former Speaker of the House, the current Democratic leader in the House of Representatives, the Honorable Nancy Pelosi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, but no thanks for putting me after the preacher's son. You arranged that, didn't you, Stanley? Well, I wish to associate myself with the remarks of our distinguished assistant leader, Mr. Clyburn, and those of Mr. Hoyer. I did hear those two coming in, and anyone who went before who said something magnificent about John Spratt. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having us here for this historic occasion when we in the House of Representatives and our friends are able to show respect to a great man. What is it, 11,000, maybe 12,000 people have served in the Congress? John Spratt's in the top 10, that's for sure. That's for sure. The gentleman or the gentle lady from our state, he truly comes by that name very personally and honestly. He is truly a gentleman. So for all of us, and now in this I speak for all of us, we are proud to have called you colleague, Mr. Chairman. Delighted to call you Mr. Chairman. And I know many will talk about his leadership on the Budget Committee. But I just want to say that as chairman of the Budget Committee, which is a committee about numbers, for John it was always about values. He took the message, the narrative of what a budget should be, a statement of our national values, a narrative about what it meant, what it means to our children, to our families, to our economy, to our future. He brought the perspective of an armed services high up in the Armed Services Committee, and a man who had served our country in the military, and understanding that we must be a strong nation, and that must be reflected in our budget, as well as the strength measures in the health and well-being and education of our people. When he rose to speak on the floor, everyone listened, and not only heard, but they heeded what he had to say. This is one great man. His sharp intelligence, his strategic thinking about how to get something done. Again, the values that he brought to every debate, the respect that he had for every member, wherever, on either side of the aisle, and on either side of the Capitol, there too, and down the street as well. Partisanship was not anything that was about John Spratt. Respect for every person's view was. So Jane and Sarah and Susan and Catherine, thank you, and grandchildren, thank you for sharing John Spratt with us, and in doing so with the nation. Make the future better for all of America's children. One great man, an honor to serve with you, John. I can't wait to see your painting. And anytime anyone comes by this room, they will be able to say, that's John Spratt, a true American patriot. Thank you for serving our country.
Now pleased to recognize former chairman of the House Budget Committee, the current chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, and served as ranking member under Chairman Spratt, the Honorable Paul Ryan.
Hi, John. It's great to see you. I've got these talking points, but let me just say this. I remember thinking to myself, if we're going to be in the minority, well, at least my chairman's John Spratt. John, you are a dignified man. And we had a lot of debates in those days. And what I loved about John Spratt is he always let everybody have their say. He never shut the debate down. He was fair to everyone. And as a result of that, he was respected by everyone. You know the numbers. This is a committee where you really had to get into the deep minutia, and no one knew the minutia better than John Spratt. he also knew the military quite well. I remember in Kandahar sitting around a big table with a bunch of generals about 10 years ago, just watching him go through all that the military was dealing with, all the issues, and all of these generals getting stumped by John Spratt. It was fun to watch, actually. John not only knew the numbers, John had a huge impact. He was one of the architects of the 1997 budget agreement, which was the last time we basically balanced the budget. It's a pretty good impact for a budget chair. Kind of wish I had that. But more importantly, John, I remember sitting here as ranking member thinking to myself, well, if I ever get the chance of having the gavel, that's the kind of chairman I want to be. What I remember thinking was, that's what I want to emulate. I want to be like that man, because that man is fair, that man is honest, that man is respected, and you are a fantastic public servant, and it's an honor for me to call you friend and to have called you our chairman. Thank you and congratulations.
Now, please introduce the gentleman from Kentucky, a member of the House Budget Committee, the Honorable John Yarmouth.
Thank you. Thanks very much. It is an honor for me to represent the Democratic members of the Budget Committee at this joyous occasion. I think I'm one of only 2 members of the current Democratic membership of the Budget Committee who's actually had the privilege of serving with John. And that was, I have many fond memories of, not just because we were in the majority, but that's part of it. I have 3 lasting impressions of serving with John Spratt on the Budget Committee. One was his, as Paul said, his incredible knowledge of the subject matter. And it wasn't just a knowledge of the numbers. It was an understanding of the impact of those numbers, the consequences for the American people, for our government, for the taxpayers. It was an extraordinary depth of understanding of the job that he was doing. Secondly, he understood governing. He understood the process. He respected the process. He understood that we can all play games and we can all make points and we can score political points as well, but ultimately we had a responsibility to govern, and that was John's primary commitment. And finally, I think, as all of us who ever knew John knows, incredible humility. In a body in which egos often vastly exceed accomplishments, John was someone who never sought the spotlight, never relished the spotlight, always wanted to do his job. And I have a personal story that I think illustrates that as well as anything could. John, you may not even remember this. It was the last day of your service in Congress. And I was walking through the lonely halls of Cannon. And John Spratt was pushing a cart through the hallway with many of the things in his office as he was moving out. And I stopped to say hello and goodbye. And John asked me if I would do him a favor. And I said, of course, John, what can I do for you? And he handed me a piece of paper, or a collection of papers. He said, would you take these down and enter them into the record? And that was his farewell remarks. And if you go back and read that speech, as I have, because it meant so much to me that here was a man who, after 28 years, wasn't interested in going down and making a show. He wanted to make a statement. And I read his speech, and it wasn't about all the things he had accomplished, all his records, even though there was much of that. He used that opportunity to talk about where he thought we needed to go as a body, as a Congress, as a people. And I remember one line out of that speech very well. He said, everything needs to be on the table, and everyone needs to be at the table. And that's how he ran his committee. That's how he organized his life and his presence here. And that's one of the reasons among many that we are so, I think, collectively joyful to be part of this ceremony. So John, to you Jane, the family, congratulations. Thank you for your service. We love you and appreciate you.
Now it is my honor to introduce to you the former chairman of the House Budget Committee, the gentleman that we honor today, the Honorable John Spratt.
I didn't start this conflagration in speaks tonight, but I would be an unconvincing member of Congress if I tell you I didn't enjoy the hell out of it. I will tell you how I got started. Where's Paul Ryan? He's been trying to protect the place on the wall for his portraits ago. And he wanted to make sure that I didn't have designs on the piece of property that he wanted. So he's been telling me, you better go ahead and make that decision and get those arrangements laid, or you're going to lose out altogether having a portrait hung at the Ways and Means Committee, the Budget Committee. I went home after the last election, deeply satisfied that having lost, nevertheless, I'd made a contribution. And I look around this room and I can think of the story of almost every one of you, of something we did that I think made the country a better country. This is my signal that things are getting a little tight. I better bring us to a conclusion. So we finally came up with this idea, and I went looking some time ago for a good portrait painter. And the person we landed upon, Chaz Fagan, has not only excelled and produced as a sculptor, but as a painter and portrait painter in particular as well. I'm going to turn over him in just a minute, let him describe what it was he was trying to do and make me look better. One of the people I talked to about being the portrait painter said, listen, for $3,000 more, we can make you 30 pounds lighter.
All he had to do was go home and live with Mom.
That's a true story. I was tempted to take it. Let me introduce somebody who is very special to Jane and me, our 5 grandchildren. Let me start with Lily Tendler, beautiful redhead. Jamie, you gonna come up?
And the other 3 over here.
Gracie? Jack? A year ago, he was a foot shorter than I am.
What about this? About Max.
Hey, Max. I'm glad you got to hear what people thought of me and I've done here. And I want you to take to heart also what we've all said here, that the highest and best calling is government service. And one of the things you can do that doesn't cost much money is start at least giving credence to and praising where it's due the work of the United States Congress and the House of Representatives in particular, excuse me. And what I want to do, if we can, Chaz, is bring the portrait out, let the grandchildren unveil it, and if you will, let Chaz say a few words himself about that, and then we'll wrap it up. But first of all, let's get where's the portrait?
How do we get
Oh. That's what's behind that scar. Guess you want to go over there and just stand there and when you...
Catherine, you go up there. You tell me.
I was actually instructed how to do it.
She was.
There he is.
Chaz Fagan, where's Chaz? Chaz has a versatility that is unmatched among all the possible candidates for this post that we considered. He, among other things, did the statue of Ronald Reagan that stands at the entrance to the Capitol of the United States. A sculpture, not a painting, a sculpture. If you go elsewhere, you'll find, among other things, a beautiful, perfect portrait of Tom Foley. And when you can reconcile the politics and personalities of Tom Foley and Ronald Reagan, it indicates you've got a lot of ability. We would very much like to hear your appraisal of what you did and why you did it the way you did it and anything else you can say. We would appreciate your effort in doing so.
Now, usually at these events, the artist is asked to speak early, safely, long in advance of an unveiling, so that the exits can be had. So I'm doubly grateful for a warm reception. Thank you. Carson Spratt just asked me to say a few words about the painting itself. But the painting, obviously, is not just a painting, it's a portrait. So a portrait, that's a big reflection of Carson Spratt himself. And, you know, normally, I like to get to know the person before I sculpt them or paint them. It's one of those things that just helps, it pulls it out of the canvas, and, you know, makes the clay move better. And as you can imagine, in this case, that was not a hard task. And now, visiting with Carson Spratt and Mrs. Spratt at their home was always a warm and wonderful experience. And my only unfortunate takeaway is that I was envious of all of you who have probably spent a lot more time with them than I have. So you can imagine the experience was just a joy that way. Now with a portrait, I like a painting that shows personality, so it's not just the likeness, but possibly a little bit behind the eyes. And I got a lot of that from the correspondent. Had a wonderful time with him, speaking of history and personal things. Very enjoyable. So that was the easy part. The other part I like to do with a portrait is to tell a story if I can. So maybe it's more subtle, really hidden details, iconography, something like that. And that is normally the big challenge I take quietly to the client, right? In this case, we sat down and a mission was declared as to what the portrait would do and what it would convey. And so basically, my job was done. So the figure is seated, and he's holding a piece of paper. The piece of paper has lettering on it. The letters say BBA. Balanced Budget Amendment. No clarification needed there. So my job after that was simply to enhance everything I could. And normally, that would mean the gaze of the figure. And as you probably all noticed, and the kids too, is when you go into a museum sometimes, there's certain paintings that look at you and look like they're looking right at you, no matter where you are in the room. That was pretty much the goal with this one. And so the feeling, therefore, that everyone in this room will be under their gaze of Congressman Spratt, who's holding that one piece of paper and looking right at them. One more really small detail, but for me it meant a lot. There's a tradition in portrait painting that goes back to forever, and you'll see them on lots of walls in the Congress, etc., where you have a figure and he's lit and he's seated or whatever, and you have a drapery in the background. So drapery in the background means, for the painter, it's something visual interest in the background, so you have something there. For tradition, drapery is a symbol of reverence. And instead of doing that, I adopted the same curve that you get from drapery. So there's a curve over his left shoulder there, on the right side. There's a little curve. It totally mimics what a piece of drapery would do. In this case, it's the curve of a roll-top desk. A desk that you'll find at the Spratt's house. And for me, that was just an extra subtle symbolism of old-fashioned work ethic and diligence. All great messages, all under the guidance of my subject. The big takeaway for me is portraits, when you go to the portrait gallery, when you're in this room, you look at portraits are perceived as windows into the past. So we get to take a peek at what people were like then, what they were wearing, what they were doing, what made them tick. In this case, Congressman Spratt took that whole concept and spun it around. This is his chance, his portrait, to sit and look into the future and to broadcast to the future that message of good stewardship in this Budget Committee room. And for that, I'm very grateful.
What a great ceremony this has been. You can feel the warmth and the love in this room for really one of the heroes of Congress. John Spratt, you are beloved. You are always welcome here in the House Budget Committee and in the House itself. I want to thank you and Jane for your incredible service to our country, and it is only fitting that the former chairman of the House Budget Committee close this gathering. So, Mr. Chairman.
What you have said tonight sums it up altogether. If we can have the kind of spirit, bipartisan spirit, that would allow you to speak as the chairman, given the fact you're a Republican, despite that fact, that kind of camaraderie, I think, can be the basis for building bigger things. And Lord knows I hope we accomplish it in the years to come. Thank you so much. All of you.